one night in a suburban park when I was 16, I got drunk and passed out. And I got woken up by a boy around my own age raping me. I'd never had sex before. I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like or not feel like. I'd heard it might hurt, but this was a pain that I'd never experienced in my life. Thankfully, I only remember small moments. Trapped in a frozen body, I remember seeing the night sky between the tree branches above me. And I remember the feeling of the damp grass and the twigs and the mud beneath me. And I remember that my head felt so heavy, like it might sink into the ground. And that was terror. That quiet enduring and observing my surroundings as everything else shut off one by one. That was pure terror. And the freeze that I experienced in that moment seeped its way into the rest of my life and being, so that I felt like I was in a near constant state of feeling stunned. I was so afraid of feeling the pain and the shock and the sadness at what had happened that I blocked it out and shoved it down, and I made it be okay. I made it be okay in order to survive. What this type of trauma does is that it boxes you in. It cuts you off from those places inside you that are creative, spontaneous, carefree, light. Its toxicity rips through the beautiful, resourcing things in life, and everything is smeared with it. It took me about a year to realise what had happened to me. And in this year, a kind of greyness or darkness settled like a veil between me and the rest of the world. And I felt dirty. And I still do sometimes. And I felt like I could be exposed at any moment as this worthless, ruined, broken thing. And I still feel like that sometimes. That's just a legacy of sexual violation. And that's just the legacy of having to carry your crime scene with you everywhere you go. According to the Central Statistics Office, approximately 6 people are sexually assaulted every day, and more than 1 rape a day is committed. But 70% of rapes do not get reported. 70%. So the actual number is more than 2 rapes a day committed in our tiny country. And of the 30% that do get reported, only 8% go to trial, and only 2% end with conviction. This means that there is an unthinkable number of men who have raped free to rape again. We still minimise sexual violence. We blame the victim, question the victim, don't believe the victim. Say things like, well, we've only got one side of the story. We have an excusing attitude towards the perpetrators and a sceptical view of the victims. We maintain that there are grades of rape, some worse than others, that there's a difference between date rape, forcible rape, and rape, that there's a confusing grey area, that I'm the kind of girl that gets raped, that there is a kind of girl that gets raped, that I brought it on myself, that it wasn't really rape, that no one will believe you anyway, there's no point in reporting it, that sure he didn't mean it, he was just chancing it, that it was my fault. And we absorb all of this. And at 16, I absorbed all of this. And the total lack of a sense of security that occurs after such a sexual violation makes us withdraw. When we are experiencing many complex layers of thoughts and feelings and beliefs, inside feels like the safest place to go. So as for telling anybody, it had been a year. I didn't really want to cause a big drama. And I was full of fears. What if this changes how they see me or how much they love me? What if they're angry with me or they blame me? What if they can't cope with it emotionally? What if they have too many questions to which I have no answers? What if they don't keep it to themselves? What if I lose control over what happens next? And the greatest fear of all, what if they don't believe me? What then? If they don't believe me, where am I supposed to put my pain then? Who am I supposed to trust? And over the years, I experienced other sexual assaults, and some had an even worse impact on me than the original rape. And I started to read more and more about sexual violence, trying to find some way to relate, to connect, to understand what happened to me and what happens to so many women and girls, and to appease the sense of disease I was experiencing. And after a few difficult years, I was bursting with wanting to talk about all of this. And I discovered that through writing, I could have a little voice, that I could use as anger and pain and wisdom I had gained to highlight the injustice that a completely preventable crime is relegated in our attitudes and beliefs as some sort of inevitability, as some sort of normality. And I knew I would have to be very personal with my politics, that in order to break anybody else's silence, I'd have to break my own. But I found each step I took that I grew more confident in my opinions and more confident in my impatience and more confident in my anger. And I found that sense of liberation that comes with being unapologetically true to yourself. And I found beautiful, kind, strong parts of myself that I didn't know were there. While we rightly acknowledge the bravery it takes for rape survivors to tell their stories, we omit reflecting on why it is they have to be brave. Rape victims not only have to deal with the dark places and the fears within themselves, but they have to deal with the dark places and fears within everybody else. It shouldn't be on rape survivors to tell their stories, sacrificing themselves over and over again in the hope for change. What if we could all be brave enough, curious enough, to look at our own fears around rape and the men who commit it? What if we could all non-judgmentally, with self-compassion, explore and challenge our attitudes and beliefs and biases, so that if they are, that they no longer unhelpfully affect how we engage on this topic. The greatest thing I learned in my journey of becoming a therapist is the power of sitting with discomfort. And I learned that change isn't other people, change is me. It's sitting with my own fears and anxieties that is the tough thing, that needs the courage, but also the thing which is the most transformative, not just for me, but for the world I live in. And self-reflection takes courage because it can be frightening. We might see things we don't want to see, but change only happens when we're uncomfortable. Imagine for one moment what the world might look like if the stigma around being a rape victim didn't exist. If all of those damaging and harmful and dangerous prejudices and myths and biases and stereotypes and assumptions and stereotypes were gone. How rape victims would thrive and recover in a supportive society like that. And how those men who rape would have a lot less to hide behind. I don't want to be called brave for speaking about this anymore. I want to live in a world in which I do not have to be brave. And people are speaking up a lot more, really bluntly, about rape and the spectrum of sexual violence. But there are important voices missing, voices that could work for change from within. 98% of rapists are men, but we're still afraid of causing offence by naming that truth. 98% of rapists are men, but we still call rape a women's issue. Isn't it time that men were part of this conversation about their fellow man, about their brothers and their uncles and their friends and their colleagues? The President of Ireland wrote to me last year after I gave a speech on this theme as well. And in his letter he said, "Your speech is one of radical truth." And this radical truth, which I thought was just common sense, is that as long as the non-abusive men are silent and passive and complacent on sexual violence, as long as they think it has nothing to do with them because they're not a rapist, then nothing will ever change. Nothing will ever change. Peer influence is our most powerful tool for social change. We all want our behaviours, beliefs, to be accepted and condoned by the people in our lives. We all want to belong, and behaviour is learnt. So men can use this natural inclination by being explicit, blunt and direct in their zero tolerance attitude towards male violence against women and be a role model to men and boys. And having a zero tolerance attitude is great, but it's totally meaningless unless you're showing it to other people. And that means not allowing male violence against women be a women's issue anymore. Those men among us who are predatory, who are inclined towards sexual violence, they're here in this room. They're people we know. 91% of perpetrators are known to the victim. 91% of perpetrators are known to the victim. This is as personal as it gets, because those men aren't watching me. They're not listening to me. They're watching what other men are doing, saying and believing. They're watching their peers. So they're watching you. So if you're not saying no out loud, what are you saying? And who are you saying it to? If we want to see radical change, this is the conversation men have to be having, and it's a pity it's not a man here saying this. All I'm asking you to do is what you can, where you can, with what you have to give. Maybe it's being the person who organises the office fundraiser for the local rape crisis centre or women's refuge. Maybe it's just having a conversation with a friend or calling out some dodgy behaviour. It's up to you. It's doing whatever you can do in your sphere of life with your capabilities to explicitly demonstrate your attitude. And there are some men here for whom this will resonate with more than others, and that's fine. Those men. You are the change makers, the example setters, the role models, the men other men look up to. That's what being a leader is. Taking the risk, doing the scary thing, saying not in my name, saying as a man I do not accept this from other men and I will fight against it, because it is no longer enough to be just a man who cares. This has to be not why me, but how me. How can I help? What can I do? And it takes bravery to interrupt the status quo, to do things and to discuss things that usually women do and discuss. You might be rightfully afraid of getting looks or comments or being questioned or being laughed at even. You might be afraid of causing some sort of offence. It might be uncomfortable. But all this and more happens to rape survivors who speak out and they survive. So start being the kind of man that a rape victim will call brave. And it isn't easy being here, saying what I'm saying here this evening. This isn't a comfortable or easy message. I'm going to experience awkwardness from people that I love and silence from people I love. I'm going to experience friends purposefully avoiding certain topics of conversation. I'm going to experience plenty of abusive commentary online. I'm going to experience vast assumptions and judgments be made about me. But I'm not afraid. Because once you learn how to be comfortable with other people's discomfort, you can do it again and again, and you're stronger every time. And your life will expand, because that's what living beyond yourself does. The opposite of fear to me is not fearlessness or courage. The opposite of fear to me is hope, because while fear limits us, hope opens us to possibilities. And my hope for life and for love and for humanity was never eroded by the boy who raped me, or the man who came in my car window to sexually assault me, or the trusted friend who gently violated me as I slept, or any of the other men who've hurt me over the years. My hope is eroded every day by the silence of good men. And what I've learned over the last few years is that courage rubs off, and that we can't be what we can't see. And when one person stands up, they give permission to other people to also stand up. And when a man stands up in solidarity with rape victims and with conviction to fight for change, I wish I could articulate what that sense of hope feels like. It is a hope that brings me to tears for the beauty of it. It is that hope that makes all the work I do and all the risks I take worthwhile. Fighting sexual violence is a war, not a battle. We all need to commit to work together, to keep listening, to keep listening. Keep hoping, be brave, and keep fighting, because each person here in this room has the power to change their own worlds. My greatest fear is silence. And I've broken my silence. I've gone beyond my fear. I'm asking the men in this room, to go beyond yours. Thank you for listening.